I've been seeing a trend online lately of people needing to create full stack applications and having end-to-end type safety. This approach is hugely popular and it makes writing full stack applications that much easier. So today I want to explore with you guys how to create a full stack application with end-to-end type safety using the new Amplify Gen2. So we're going to look at a Next.js 14 application. We're going to use AWS Amplify, but we're also going to use AWS AppSync. And we're going to see how easy it is to share types between the backend and front end. And then we're going to create an application that has a many-to-one relationship. And also we're going to take a look at kind of how to put this all together. I'll make sure I put timestamps in the video below so you can jump around if you want to learn different parts of it. I really think this is a great way to create full stack applications and it's just really quick. So let's dive in a little bit more. So let me show you the application we're going to create today. So it's pretty simple. Let's assume that you're creating an application that allows you to track titles, that maybe you're creating blog posts or pieces of content and you want a central place to save all your titles, but it also allows you to leave comments to it. So it's kind of like a blog post in some ways. So here's a list of titles that I've created. I can click on any of them and then I can see a list of comments that people have left on it. If I want to, I can sign in to an account so it's protected and authorized. Now if I'm logged in, if it's a post that I created, I can actually delete it. I can add additional comments too. Additional comments and they'll appear. I can delete any of them. I can only delete them if I'm logged in. This add title only shows if I'm logged in. So this is just a basic application that kind of shows you what you could create in a full stack application. This is all this data is being saved in our managed GraphQL service backed by DynamoDB. And if I go to Amplify documentation here, you could see this is the new AWS Amplify new code first DX. So I work at AWS, so I'm a little biased, but I think this is one of the most straightforward, simpler ways to create a full stack application. And the way we did it is it uses CDK, which is Cloud Development Kit constructs in the background. So it's very straightforward to create your application, especially for author data right now. And then if you like to layer on more backend code to provision more of your backend, then you can also kind of drop down to the CDK layer and do that. And then on top of that, we have this new data model that allows you to use this schema and then share this types between the backend and in front end, and it all works together really well. And so that's what I'm going to show you today in this application. We're going to start absolutely from scratch, and then we're going to build up this application. I can show you how flexible it is and how straightforward it is. So let's take a look. For this application we're creating today, we have 12 different steps that we're going to go through, and I am going to have timestamps you can check in the description below, so you can jump in between different parts here, but we'll just start from the beginning so we have a good idea of how this works. So let's go ahead and set up the app and install the dependencies. I'm using Visual Studio Code, the latest version. I'm just using the terminal inside here. And yeah, let's create it. So npm create next app latest. And I'm going to choose most of the defaults, but I'm going to call this our code first app. We're going to use TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind. We'll leave the source directory. We'll use the app router. I won't do any customizations, so this just take a moment. Okay, it's installed. So let's go ahead and change into it, change directories into it. So now I'm to my code first app. Let's open up in the same window. Okay, so we are in a basic Next app and we haven't done any changes to it. So let's install a few libraries. And so we'll do an npm install AWS Amplify, AWS Amplify UI React, and AWS Amplify adapter Next.js. And so what these are, AWS Amplify is our JavaScript library that we're going to be using in this project. The UI React library is to add in our Authenticator, and the adapter Next.js is going to add in some special functionality we can use to be able to talk to Next with server-side rendering with our AWS AppSync. All right, so they're all installed. And let's just make sure everything is running out of the box. We haven't really changed anything here. So it's running in localhost 3001. And we'll just go to 3001. All right, great. So now we have our next app here. We haven't really changed anything. But let's say we go into the Pages app here. I always like to clean this up a little bit before I do anything. So I'm going to delete it all. Oh no, I'll put in a hello world. And then I'll go into the CSS and I'll clean this up too. Let's go back here, so make sure it's saved. All right, so we see hello world. One down, so what we really need to now is set up the Amplify Sandbox. So let's take a look at that. Now, so what we're doing in this application is we're setting up Amplify Gen2. And Gen 2 is kind of a different way of setting up your Amplify app. So we're going to set it all up in code, kind of infrastructure as code. And then we're going to have some type safety between the backend and the front end. And you can follow the Get Started guide if you go to docs.amplify.aws. It gives you some clues on what you need to do. But basically, we're going to run this npm create amplify latest to do it. And if you don't already have it, sign up for a free AWS account. It's well worth it, and you get hundreds of hours. But most of the things that we're doing in this tutorial today are on demand, so you only get charged when you're using it. So it's not like you have to worry about getting charged monthly costs because you're provisioning an EC2 instance or something like that. So you don't get charged that way at all. All right, so if we come back here, we'll do npm create amplify at latest. And what this will do is it'll ask us a few questions. Yep, we're going to have it in the root directory. It's going to install dependencies. And this will just take a second. While it's doing this, if you are completely brand new to AWS Amplify in Gen 2, you have to configure your AWS account. I'm going to skip this step, but basically you run this one right here, npx amplify configure profile -- name and the value. And this will allow you to, it'll open up a screen here and it'll ask you to enter your details. It'll create a user that will then add a file into your local system, into your .aws in your root folder. I already did that here, so I'm going to skip this step, but this is something you'll have to do if you're completely brand new to this. So it said it's done. And what that did is it created a new folder here called Amplify, and it has a couple of configurations in here. And out of the box, it comes up with this resources. So this essentially creates a Cognito user pool and identity provider for you. And so this is the way we're going to be logging in and out of our application is with Cognito. And it's all code, but if we wanted to, we could add in, like if we want to do a federated login through Amazon or Google, you can add it in here. You can add additional user attributes. By the way, user attributes can only be added when you first create your app. So this is a configuration that you have for Auth. For data, it comes with this configuration. So it comes with a basic to-do app. And this is where the type safety works for in your advantage and in the front end and the back end. So you create a schema, and this will essentially create an AWS managed GraphQL service called AppSync in the back end. And each one of these schemas you create will be tied to a separate DynamoDB table. And this will create one called to do. It only has one field called content. And then you can add authorization rules like allow owner, public to read. And we'll add our own in here in a second, but I just kind of show you what this looks like. So to get this up and running, like I said, you have to have an AWS account, but as long as you have the account, you'll have this folder in your AWS. You'll have a new AWS file, and you'll have some credential files in there. I won't show you for obvious reasons. But if that all set up, you can run npx amplify sandbox. And what this will do is it basically it'll deploy this to your backend. By the way, if the first time you run this, it might have to run a bootstrap command, so it may ask you to log in to your AWS account. Once again, I already did that before this video, but it'll go ahead and bootstrap your AWS account, And then what it's doing here is it's creating this ephemeral environment, it's creating the user pool, and it's also creating the AWS AppSync account. And this is an environment that will only last as long as you keep it running, and it's not used for production. Later on at the end of this video, I'll show you guys how you can take this code and then create a production environment that you can use. This is kind of interesting way of doing this too, as this is provisioning. If you look at the documentation, this cloud, you have these local development, and the idea really, I'll zoom in here, is that every single user will have their own sandbox environment. So me as Erik, I'll have my own sandbox environment, but Jim or Renee or Joseph will have their sandbox environments. And the sandbox environments can match what it looks like in production. So this environment you can quickly spin up, run it, and use it. And what you could do as well, if you didn't want every single user to have their own sandbox environment, you can share sandbox environments too. There's an Amplify configuration file that's created. You can share it with multiple users. So maybe you have one sandbox environment that has a bunch of data in there you want to share. You could do that. You can also set up scripts and other ways to load data into your sandbox environment, because obviously it'll be empty as soon as it runs. But yeah, we've been trying to think of like what's a really good developer experience, and that's what we have come up with. So while this is running, this will take a few minutes to bring it up to speed. We do have set up all our routers and routes and folders. So let's see here. The way I'm kind of thinking about this app is we're going to use all the next 13, 14 features with the app router. Well, we're going to use obviously the app router and user server components. We're also going to use server actions. So let's see if we can set this up. I'm going to create a new folder here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a folder here. So I'm going to create one called _actions and then actions.tsx, well, TS. So this is going to be where I'm going to put all my actions. It's also _actions, so it doesn't actually add a route for this app route. We could put it in the source folder too. I know I kind of go back and forth on it. All right, so I added in a components folder, which is empty, an Amplify utils folder, which will add some information in, an app folder. So now we have an add and a sign in route. So that should be it for our different routes. All right, so let's set up authentication. So we're going to create a new file, and we're going to create an auth folder, and inside that it's going to be auth.tsx. Great. And so inside this auth.tsx file, we'll go ahead and add in, let's do a little bit of configuration here. So first, this is going to be a client. And we're going to import in Amplify from AWS Amplify. And then we're going to import in config. So we could check back at our app here, and you can see we have this brand new ephemeral environment. We have all these outputs, and it's done. You can tell it's done because it has this little check mark here, and the deployment is done. And we're going to import config from this folder here. So it's going to be one lower, and I believe it's called Amplify configuration.json. And then we'll have to import in some styles. And this is all in the documentation, but I have it memorized. CSS. And then we'll import in this Authenticator component from this AWS Amplify UI React. And then we need to run this command amplify.configure, and we'll pass in that config. And then we'll put this SSR true option in here. And what we want to do here is we'll actually have the whole app surrounded by this app. And this is also where you can put other providers if you had some others in your app. We don't in this case. It's going to be .react, and we'll do react.react node. And then for our app, we're just going to return this authenticator.json. provider, and this kind of gives us access to the authenticator all over, and we'll have this children. And that should be it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into we'll go to the layout TSX, and I'm going to change this title. We're going to call it title listing. List all titles and comments app. And I'll leave all the rest of this. I'm not going to change any fonts or anything. I'm just going to leave it very simple. But right here, where it says children, now we're going to surround the whole app by auth. And if I did this right, we should be able to auto import this in. But so I think I'm just going to import in the other way from /components /auth. And it's a default import, so not a named import. All right. So now we have this auth in here. And it really hasn't changed much. So if we look at our app, okay, so if you run npm run dev here, it's running on localhost 3001. If you go to localhost 3001, or it's already here and reload it, it doesn't really change anything. But now we have this new provider working in the background. So I think what we should do next is see if we can get we have this sign-in route, and let's see if we can get the sign-in to work correctly. So I'm going to go to the sign-in route. And let's see here. Basically that's a snippet I'm using. And really here, and we'll call this sign in, we want to use the Authenticator component. So if you come back here to the AWS documentation and you click on UI library, you can see that we have this thing called a connected component and this authenticator. And what this is going to do is it allows us to really quickly add in a way for users to sign in and create accounts. And we want to be able to do this with a minimal amount of code and boilerplate and things like that. And this works correctly in the whole AWS Amplify ecosystem. We could definitely do this with the JavaScript v6 library if we wanted to. The JavaScript library I had installed earlier. But I think this will be the easiest way to do it. This is a client component though, so these are server components, so that's obviously going to be an issue. So what I want to do, is we're going to create a new file. And so I'm going to call it sign in. We'll go auth client.tsx. Probably not the greatest name, but that'll work. And then we'll save that inside our components folder. Inside our auth folder, perhaps. And so this file will be a client. So I'm going to use client here. I'm going to import in the Authenticator from AWS Amplify UI React. And we'll call this, it's basically sign in or sign up. So we'll just call it auth client. And this will return the authenticator. And we'll just self-close it. Let's see here. Because we don't really need anything else. And then we'll export default sign in. We'll call it auth client actually. And let's see here. It's giving me a little squiggly line here. I think I just need to reload. Let's try to reload the window for a second. Sometimes when I get red squiggly lines, I have to do that. And while that's reloading, I'm going to go back into the sign in page. And then I'm going to just import it in. So instead of doing sign in here, We're going to do the auth client and save it. And now let's see if this works. So I'm just going to come back here and we'll just go to sign in, our new sign in route. And our server is still running. Cool. So here it is. Now we have our sign in page. We don't really have a way to sign out or do anything yet, but we know at least we have the sign in page. So I think what we want to do next is see if we can set up all the routers and folders, and then we'll set up the nav, and then we'll come back to the sandbox here in a second. But let's see if we can set up like a navigation component. So let's create a new file, and we're going to call it navbar. And we'll save that inside our components. Yeah, we'll just call it right here because this is going to be also another client component. We're going to call it use client. And what this navbar is going to do is going to allow us to quickly show all our routes. Now this navbar is pretty big, so let me kind of copy and paste some of it in. So that way we can save a little bit of time. Okay, so here is our navbar, and let me explain what we're doing here. So first we have this is signed in prop that we're passing in. So later on we want to track if a user is signed in or not, and we'll have a prop that kind of helps do that. So we'll have this use state here, we'll have this auth check to see if someone is signed in or not, and we'll just default it to this prop this boolean that's passed in. And then we're using React router, which is this use router. Well, it's this navigation, this next router that is. And then we're using use effect, and we're using something called hub. Now hub, if we look in the official documentation, if we go back to outside of this Gen 2, let's see here. If we go back here and look up hub. So hub is it's a utility that helps you figure out if a user, if certain actions have happened. So like, for example, we can look for auth and then see if a user signed in or signed out and then do something. So since this is a nav bar, we want to show if a user is signed in or not, and then either show a sign in button or a sign out button. So we're going to use this hub to listen for auth events. And then every time it's signed in, we're going to set this state, this use state, to true. And then we're also going to navigate them to the root. And then also for the sign out. So if someone clicks the sign out button, we're going to do that as well. And then we have this hub listener cancel button that just to help clean up this subscription once you move, if at any time this component gets destroyed. And then I have this sign out check, which if we go to the code, this is a button. So as soon as you click this button, it's going to check to see if the user is signed in or signed out. If they are signed in, then it's going to sign out. And this sign out is directly being pulled from our JavaScript library, this AWS Amplify /auth. Otherwise, it moves them to the sign in route. And then I just have two routes here, basically a home and add title. And this add title is how you're going to add titles later on. And then I'm filtering right here. I had this logged in true. So I wanted to make sure that if a user's not logged in, that they don't see this add route, because it wouldn't work, because you can only add titles when you're logged in. And then I'm using these flex components, which are all from the UI React library. Most of the time in this app, I'm using Tailwind, but since we're using UI React, I thought I would use it. Then this just shows all the different routes by using this map. And then I have this button that signs out. And then I have the text here that says sign out or sign in. So let's see if this will work. So this needs to be in our layout. And what we'll do is we'll right above the auth, we'll add this navbar. Now it's kind of complaining because we had that is signed in. So we'll just default it to right now to false. And then we can test it out. So let's see if we did this right. Another thing too, in our page TSX, I have this main. I think what I want to do here is you know what, I'll leave it like this, I suppose. Maybe I'll make it width 1/2 and then M auto to have it kind of in the middle. Let's see what it looks like. All right, cool. So now we have a hello world still, but now we have this big beautiful nav bar at the top that says sign in. If we click sign in, it goes to the page that shows this sign in. Awesome. So let's see if it works. So this should change to sign out as soon as we log in. Since this is the first time doing this, we'll have to create an account. And like I said, this is backed by Cognito. We could actually even look at this Cognito user pool in the AWS console if we want. We'll look at that later, but for now, let's see if I can create an account. So I'm just gonna use an old email address I have here. I'm gonna call it test. Oops. And then I'm gonna log in and not gonna save it. So on my phone, I'm gonna look at this email. So now I should have an email. Here it is. And by the way, sometimes it shows up in your spam folder, so keep that in mind. 769-764. Click confirm. Cool. Now it says sign out at the top. So now I have essentially an add title showed up. Now we don't have anything in this route yet. That's great. Now one thing that we do have a problem with, so if I click sign out here, this works. If I click sign in, I go back to sign in. Now I have this new account I just created. And by the way, it did add in some cookies to keep the JWT tokens for this user when I log in. But if I refresh the page, if I kind of just refresh it, it's back to sign in, even though technically we're actually signed in already. So if I go into the inspect and I look at the application and then I look at cookies. So we already have the Cognito cookies already here, but we're technically, it still says sign in here. So that obviously that's a problem because now we go to the sign in and we don't see anything. The Authenticator thinks we're already logged in. So we're in a kind of a weird state. Now to get out of this weird state, I can go into storage here and just like clear the site data and then refresh it. And now it's back and go back home. So that's not good. So where that comes from really is if we go back to our layout, we don't have any way as soon as the app loads for it to know if the user signed in or not. The easiest way to fix that is we're going to use server components to take care of this. So for server components, I always look back at the documentation. So I'm going to go back to the docs documentation. And if I go into server-side rendering, it says we installed this adapter we did at the beginning of our app, but now we have this way to do things through this runWithAmplifyServerContextRunner. And what this is used for is when you're on the server, you can basically surround all your server calls inside this server runner, and then it'll protect it, these API calls, so you don't have any chance of accidentally leaking it out to the front end. It's actually pretty straightforward, so let's set that up. To do that, I'm going to create a new file. I think I actually already created it, so it's called Amplify utils. It's in the utils folder. And we're going to create a new create server runner. So I'm going to be lazy. I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it. And one thing with this config, it's that Amplify configuration. So I believe it's at the root. Since we have this run with Amplify Server Context, we actually want to run some commands. And you can see here if you scroll down, that says you can do authentication with Next.js server-side runtime. You can do it through middleware. But what I'm going to do, instead of using with middleware, I'm going to use this same kind of concept they're doing here, but put it in this utility file and then import it into any component I need, server component I need, to where I need to check to see if a user is logged in or not. If you want to do this for all routes, you put this in your middleware file, but I just want to do it for some routes. You can see here is a few other examples of ways to do it. And if you look at the bottom, it tells you different functions that you can use. So there's server functions and client functions. So we can use, in this case, get current user, which would be on the server and on the client. So we're going to use the server version of get current user. So I'm going to create a const called isAuthenticated. And that's going to be async component. And what this is going to do is we're going to await run with Amplify server context. That's what we extracted before. We're going to do next server context. And then we're going to pass in some cookies. Now we haven't imported these cookies in yet. I don't think yet. So to do that, you'll have to import in cookies from next headers, but we'll do async operation here. And then we'll do context spec. And then this is going to be brought in a try catch. So error, and that there's an error will return false. And then we're going to run user await, and this is where we're going to do the get current user. So I'm going to import in get current user, and it looks like it already saw it. Okay, so it's an AWS Amplify /auth. So we're going to wait, and also this is the client version. So if you want to use the server version, it's /server. So keep that in mind. It's really easy to get these confused. So this is the server version of it. All right. So now that we have this get current server, so we'll wait, get current user. We're going to pass in that context spec, and then we're just going to do this to see if it's a user, if it's true or false. If this fails, it'll go to false. They'll basically throw. But if it's fine, it'll just return the user. Now, there is some user information we might want. So you can see here, if you user, there's sign-in details, user ID, and username. We don't really collect much information like username when you log in, so I'm just going to leave this the way it is. Great. So now we have this is authenticated, and we should be able to use this in our servers to be able to check to see if something's authenticated. And you see from our nav bar, we need to send an is signed in over. So let's see if we can get this working. So I'm going to go to the layout. And in here, I could just await it inside here. Instead of doing this false, I'm going to do wait is authenticated. Now it's complaining here about this await because we don't have this async. So we'll do async. There it is. Since we're running this in the root layout, so it'll have to run through this authentication anytime the app loads. You can make, this is probably fine for our scenario, but you may want to test it on different devices and how, if this affects the speed and loading of the website. I'm going to go back to our app. So if we refresh it, I think we logged out, so it still says log out. We'll click sign in. We'll click sign in. Cool. And we'll try and sign in again. Cool. So now if I refresh it, it still says sign out. So it's not like switching to sign in real quickly and showing sign out. It's calling the calling this Amplify utils. It's saying that it's signed in, and then it's displaying. And also I have this console log, which I'll delete. So yep, it's working expected. If I click sign out, then it's signed out and it redirected back to the root page. Great. So now we have a really rudimentary login system. So we really want to be able to add and list titles. That's number 5 and 6 on our list here. We haven't set up anything up on that. So if we go back to our app and we look this data, we left it kind of all defaulted. So all we have is this to-do model, which doesn't really make sense since we're not doing to-dos. So what we want to do is add in a better way of doing this with a post and comments and things like that with our titles. So I'm going to delete. I'm just going to delete all this, and I'm going to start over. All All right, let's add in a post. Now I can call this a title, but I'm just going to go ahead and call it a post. Just kind of give the idea of we have posts and comments, and we have an A, and I'm going to use a model here. And a model, as it says here, is a data model that creates a matching Amazon DynamoDB table and provides create, read, update, delete, and subscription API. So it basically adds in all the AppSync resolvers for you, so you don't have to do that yourself. And then we can add in fields. And I really like this TypeScript. It tells exactly what to do here. So I'm going to add one called title. And then I'm going to use this A again, string, and then it's going to be required. So that means you'll definitely have to have this as when you create any of these posts. I'm going to add comments. I'll come back to this comments in a second. And then I also want owner authorization. I'll show you how that works in a second as well. But I think it makes more sense right now if I add in this authorization. So this is really neat. You can add authorization for your app, so only certain users or certain people can make updates or changes to it. So this is an array. So I'm going to allow public. I'll move this mouse so you can see better. So this means any public users can read. So I can do like this. But I really don't want public users to like update or delete anything because that wouldn't make sense. And so also on top of this, I also want to allow owners, basically people who have created it, to, we'll do a.allow.owner. And you can see here, this is the type of authorization access an owner has. Basically anybody that who's logged in, who actually creates it, will have updates, will be able to update and change it. And so here are the two types of authorization. So I want all public users to be able to read it, and then allow owners to create, read, update, and delete changes to it. And just to make sure that owners don't have too much power, they have this owner field, which gets added on since we're using this type of authorization. And what we can do is only allow owners to read and delete. There we go. So now owners should be able to read and delete, but they're not able to reassign. So they're not going to be able to take their posts and reassign it to someone else, or because that'd be annoying, obviously, if someone was able to reassign their own post to someone else's name. So that's our post. And then we want also a comment, and we want a relationship between these. So in our comment, we're going to also have a here, and we'll have to have a comma here. So this a.model, and then in this model here, we'll make one called content. So this will be whatever's inside here. You can also notice post, I only have a title, I don't have any content. Just for the sake of this, maybe we're just creating titles to save for social media posts. So we'll have a string here, we'll make it required, and then we'll make a post, and we'll have it belongs to post. So what this is doing is we can have relationships. We can have has many, is, belongs to. So this will set up the relationship for us. And then we'll also have owner as well. And I'm just going to copy and paste the same thing here. And then we'll have also basically the same authorization rules to allow users to read, but only owners to change. Now, we have a belongs to here, but we don't have a has many. So let's add that in. I'm going to add comments. And you can see here we can do has many, has one. We'll do has many relationship to comment. And now when we're querying, we should be able to query the comments and the post. So when you're inside a post, you can get the comments that you need, which will be very, very helpful to us. So I'm going to save that. And if you look here, now I've stopped and restarted this a few times, but we'll need to restart our sandbox. We'll do Amplify Sandbox. if it was running, it would automatically detect the changes that I just did, and it'll update the backend for us. So we'll just give it a second while it updates the backend for us. Other than that, if you look down here, this is all defaulted. What it's saying is that our default authorization mode will be API key, and that'll need to be changed every 30 days. The API key is going to be inside the Amplify configuration JSON file if we need it. It also has a URL and a bunch of other things. This is kind of interesting. So what this means is that this API key will expire in 30 days. You can set up inside the Amazon console, or anytime you push, you can have it increase the expire days, or basically reactivate it so it won't expire in 30 days. You can also set this up to 365 days. And the reason we set this in production and everywhere else is just to keep it an idea that you probably should be rotating your API keys in case someone steals it and starts sending a bunch of stuff to your endpoint. Now you know that you're protected by the key actually expiring after a while. All right, so we have our posts contents. Now we want to be able to see if we can list it. So we'll do that. I also want to mention real quick that this example is pretty straightforward, but just between a post and comments, you can do relationships. Like I said, it handles all the resolvers and everything for you because we're using this dot model. But there are other cases where you might need to do more additional API level changes. And we do have quite a few things to support that. So if you go to the data category, if you go back to the docs site, there is adding custom business logic. So if you wanted to create your own custom queries, you can connect this directly up to a Lambda resolver if you wanted to. We also have the capabilities. You can also add much more complicated authorization rules. And, I mentioned before there was that owner and private. This gives you the explanation of what those are if you want to kind of dig deeper into it. And this is also how you can add in customizations to each record, field level authorization rules. And you can also connect to like OpenID and a whole bunch of other things. And we have ways too of actually dropping down to the CDK level. So there is examples of like adding in storage, which would require you to install AWS CDK lib, and then you can create your own stack and then add in storage. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to keep it straightforward and just have this post and comment model, and we'll go from there. So for the next thing we need to do is to add in a way to list all the different posts. And so right now I want to basically list it on the front page here. So instead of saying hello world, I'm going to put in a list of all titles, because really, if we look at our schema, we have comments and titles. We don't really have any we don't have the middle piece, the content part. We just want to list the titles. And we'll do a little bit of tailwind work here. I'll make this a little bigger. We'll put a little padding at the bottom. And now we want to go and list all the posts. So first we need to figure out how do we even grab posts. And this is where I want to go back into my Amplify utils and add in a very handy util for the server. So there's a couple of different ways you can connect to our AWS AppSync server. One is you can do it on the client side with something called generateClient. So if we go back to our docs here, this is the way to do this on the client side. There's generateClient, and this is a part of the JavaScript v6 library. If you're in here in Gen 2 and you're on the server, since we're using the server way, and we have this plugin that we installed, this adapter, there's something called generate server client using cookies, and we have that in our server side docs. So if we do generate server client cookies, there's two of them. There's using rec response and using cookies. And I keep accidentally hitting print instead of Control K. And we have more examples of this too in the docs. Come back over here. You can see the different types. So if you're using like route handlers, you probably want to use this generate
client using cookies. If you're using middleware, using this. Since we're using server components, we want to use this generate server client using cookies. And there's a pretty good example of how to set this up. So right here, we have this command. So I'm just going to copy some of these in here. And we have this example here. So I'm going to add this to the top. And this config here, we already have the config imported in. It's just from that JSON file. And we already have the cookies. Now, one thing you'll notice here is there's this schema. So if we go back to this resource TS file, we have this const schema here. Right at the bottom, we're doing this export type schema, client schema, type of schema. So this is going to allow us to have type safety from the front end and in the back end. Because as we create our back end code here, creating the schema, and by the way, if we look here, it's already done. And now we could see we have all our configuration. It's already updated the JSON file. But we want to essentially grab the schema and have it available here. And that way, when we use this cookie-based client in our app, it's going to be typed correctly. So if I hit Control-Alt here, I'm going to import it in from not data store, but this data resources. So now we have this new cookie-based client. And we want to be able to list it out. So I'm going to come back over here. And we're going to now have it available. So let's see here. We're going to const. And we're going to await, and we'll have to make sure this is async. Await, and we'll do cookie-based client. See, it already imported it in. And really nice thing is I can hit dot here, and I can see I can get models, and I can get post, and then I can list. And I can also do updates and creates and deletes, things like that. And one thing, nice thing is, through GraphQL, one of the advantages of it, other than having this language that makes it easier to map your backend to your front end, is that you can specify exactly what you want. So I'm going to create a selection set, which is right here. If I'll try that again, selection set. And I can then say exactly what I want in here. Now it shows comments because we are connected comments because it has that relationship. If I just go title, I don't really want the comments right this second, and ID are the only two things I want. And if we come back here too, right now these two are running essentially on the client side. So kind of what I like to do here is when I run this, I want to set the default auth mode. So I'm going to add that to user pool. That means you have to be logged in to run this. And then I'm going to override it here because many of my other times I'm using this API, I'll probably want auth mode, but sometimes I want API key. But since this is a public, remember we set this to allow read public, we need to change the auth mode again, and I'll set it back to API key. And now I should be able to run this posts into our app. So if we look here, we have data, errors, extensions. I'm not going to worry about errors right now. And I'm going to rename this to posts. And I should be able to just kind of show, I'm going to just do a map through it. So, well, first what I can do is I'm just going to console log posts to see what it looks like. And it's running on the server, so we'll need to make sure we have the right one open. And we stopped the server, so let me start it again. And we're just going to make sure that it works. All right, so the server is running. I'm going to go back to my title listing app. Okay, so it says list of all titles here. All right, cool. So we have an empty array here. There's nothing in here, which makes sense since we haven't added anything. But let's, assuming when we do add something, so I'm going to do posts.map. We're going to do async post index to have something here. So right now, we know we only have a couple things in here, so we'll just put in, we'll add a key in key, and this will equal the index. And then we'll create a div, and then we'll create post dot, yeah, we see ID and title. So maybe I just have title here. There we go. And we'll just need to fix the squiggly brackets because we need a closing div here. All right. So once again, we're not going to see any change because we don't have anything in here. But let's see if we can add a way to add something, and we'll create it to the add route. All right, so we need to add a post. And if you remember, we created at the beginning a new add. So this will probably be where we want to do this at. We're going to use our React server component, and we're going to call this probably, I don't know, add post. And since this is a server component, we're going to try to use server actions here to get what we need to get. Now we also have a server actions folder, which will in a second add a new server action so we can use it. So let's add some HTML here. I'm going to create a form, and the form is going to have an action called, well, we'll call it createPost. We'll add that in there in a second. We don't have it yet. And I'll add some class names onto this. Class name, we'll make it just using some flexbox here to center everything, to add a few gaps. And then we'll have input, and we'll have an input of type, it's going to be type text. And then we'll call this title. And we'll need to have the ID title too. I like to add a few other things. We're going to add a placeholder. We're going to call it title. And then we'll have a class name here with some classes. I'm just going to copy and paste this from my other screen. Save it. There we go. And then we're going to have a button. So button. It's going to be a type submit. And once again, we'll have a few class names here. We'll do text white, background teal 600, rounded P4, and we'll just call that submit. Okay, I like this. Yeah, let's see. We don't have this create post yet. Let's create this post. So in my actions, I'm going to create a new one called create post. So I don't know if I need to add this in there. I think I'll add a use server at the top just to make it explicit. So we'll do export async function create post. That's going to have some form data in there. Just type form data. And then we're going to use our cookie-based client again. So let's close this. Cookie-based client. There it is. And then we'll do models. And once again, this is really nice. We have TypeScript, so we can auto-complete it here. So we'll do post.create. And inside here, it's going to ask us what we want to create. So we're going to have a title. And it's going to automatically generate some of the other things for us, like the ID. So we'll do formatted data.get, and we're going to grab the title, and we'll have a toString here, and if it's nothing, we'll just put in nothing there. And then also, after someone adds something, we want to redirect them. So I'm going to add in a redirect, and this is just a Next.js redirect, and it already added it in nicely in there. It's actually, I think that's the wrong, yeah, this is the wrong. So we're going to go next navigation. There it is. That's the correct one, I think. Yep. Yeah. So now it'll do this here, and we can do something here if we want to. We have a data and errors. Maybe we'll just console log the data, create post data for now. And now we should be able to use this in here. Now, the create post I just added in, I could just import it in, I suppose. Import in create post from. And this should be in our, where did I put this? This is in our actions, which I put in app. Say more and more, I think maybe I should have put the actions in the same level as the components, but I don't know, actions. Cool. So this will automatically add the title and then redirect back over. I'll click sign in. I'll log in. And we have list all tasks. Now click add title here. There we are. So now we can add in a title. So let me add the title as this is the first title. I'll submit it. Cool. So now we have this. This is the first title. Now I don't like the way it's in there. I think it's because I have this min H screen here. I could delete this. Cool. This is the first title. So now I have the first title listed. And with this first title, I probably should have a way to delete that title as well. So let's take a look at that next. Let's take a look at a way to delete posts. From right here, you see this lists all the posts, but what I'm thinking on this page here is we'll have a little X button, and then you click it and it deletes it. But we also have to make sure, because if we go back to our resource file, you should only be able to be the owner. Only the owners will be able to delete. I think in a future iteration of this, I'd also add in groups. One thing really cool about this is I can do a.allow.group defined in, which allows me to have group ownership of this. So if I have like an admin group, any admin owners can go in and delete posts or titles. But for this example, we won't do that. It still looks like we still have everything running. Oh, since I saved it, it's gonna rerun this. It actually does hot deploys, so if there's, or hot swap deploys, so if there's just minimal changes, it'll just do the change quickly. So this shouldn't take like 10 minutes every time you change something. The way I want to approach this is, this is great. We're using it on the server side, but typically when we start to get into more advanced use cases, doing everything on the server side is not fun. So what I probably want to do is create a client, and this client will be a new file that we'll create that will pass in everything we want. For the sake of time, I'll go ahead and create a post client, which I'll pass everything in. So in the components, let's create a new file, we'll call it post.tsx. And let me just copy and paste everything in, and I'll explain what it's doing. So obviously it's a client component, so you have use client at the top. I'm using router, navigation. Now I'm passing a few things in. You can see here the TypeScript definition. I'm doing a pick or a post. And the reason I'm doing this, just the title and ID, is because if we look back at here, I'm just doing title and selection set, title and ID. And I can grab the schema here and use this as a type from that data resources. I can use this pick, and this just says in TypeScript, just grab these two values. So that's what we're going to do with this post. I'm having on delete, which will be a server action that we're going to pass in. We also have an index and an is signed in numbers. The idea would be, if we go back to our page tsx file, we're going to not include the posts. I kind of went back and forth on this. Do we want to do the map inside the component or outside the component? I wanted the component to be really generic. So in that case, we're just going to do it outside the component. And then we're going to pass in the index and is signed in. We might even need to pass index in. I'll have to play around with it. We'll look. We'll see. And then we'll have this new route. So if you remember at the beginning, I created a few routes. And one of them right here was, well, I haven't created it yet. I want to create also a route that will be for the comments. So we'll create one called posts. And then inside here, we'll create a new folder called ID. And then we'll have a new file there called page.tsx. And so this will be a way to go directly into the post or the title and look at the comments. So that's why we have this on detail. Here I just have a button. Anytime you click on it, it'll go to the route. And then we're just going to show the post title. And then here, this is interesting, is that we don't want everybody to be able to click the delete button. We only want logged in users to be able to see it. So we don't want logged in people that are not logged in to click the delete button. And that's why I have this is signed in. Otherwise they see null. And this is signed in is also being passed in. So that looks pretty good, I think. And now we have to do a few things. So first, I think what we want to do is we want to create the onDelete post in our actions. So I'm going to go into our actions here. We already have this createPost. So let's do that. Async function onDelete post. I don't really like the naming here. I could change it, but we'll leave it as is. And we're going to use our wait again, this cookieBasedClient models post dot delete, and then we just need to pass in the ID, which we'll pass in right here. And then we could do console log data deleted, and obviously we'd probably want to do the errors. This is data and errors. I guess we can put in the errors too. You see here we also have errors. And then lastly, we'll revalidate. And this is a Next.js feature that allows you to like refresh a certain path. Because we're actually, once you delete it, we're on the same route. We just want it to refresh. I'll have to import that in from Next cache. Great. So that's all we need to do here for this delete on delete post. And now we kind of figure out inside this file here how we're going to pass everything in. So we have this post.map. Let's see here. So let's comment all this out. Well, let's delete it. And now we have this post. We'll self-close it. And let's see here if I could get it to, yep, there it is. Component, I did the options period there. But it needs a few things. A few missing props that are required. So first, the IDX, we'll pass in the index. The onDelete, we'll pass in onDelete post, which will automatically get imported in here. We need the post, which is just going to be the post that we sent in. I don't know why. I wonder, do we need key and index? Yeah, I think we could do this. I'm going to delete this index here. I'm going to save this. I'm going to put key equals index here. Delete this. I think that makes sense. And then is signed in. Yeah, it still thinks we need to get rid of this here. There we go. I think that, okay. And is signed in. Remember, we created that really nice utility action. This one right here. Yeah, this is authenticated. So we can use this here too to see if a user is signed in. So we'll go back here. We'll do is signed in equals await is authenticated. Authenticated. There we go. Awesome. So now we have this new post. And the reason we submit the is signed in because then we want only users who are signed in to be able to delete it. So let's take a look at this. All right, cool. So you can see right here, list of all titles. This is the first title. I have a little X there. If I click sign out, I'm going to sign in. Come back here. Let's see here. If I hit sign out. Yeah, it seems like there's a bug here that it's not automatically removing this here. So let me double check something. Okay, so I found a little bug, and I think it's just caused by the way server components do revalidation. But there's this thing called use transition, which can be used with these server components. And if I use this router.push and a router.refresh in the start transition, it fixes it. So every time you sign in and sign out, it should refresh the page correctly. So here it is. I'm signed out. I come back in here. Now it looks okay. I have the X, but if I sign out, it's disappeared. So I can't click on it again. And so let's take a look what happens when I try to delete. Click the X button here. Cool. So it disappeared. It's deleted. I can go back here, add another one. So add title, some other title. Hit enter. It redirects and looks like it's working correctly. So the next thing we need to worry about is comments. All right, so let's take a look at this post, and we want a way for this post. When you click on it, it goes to this route. So it basically shows details for this post. So I went ahead and just started that process behind the camera here just to speed up the process a little bit. So here, if we look in here, we have this posts route, and this ID right here is a dynamic route. So anything after the posts in the URL will be a dynamic route. So now here's the pages. So this is what I just added in. Now let me explain what it does. So first we have this posts here. We have this is signed in. I'm not using this yet. I just added it in. And then just like we did earlier with this cookieBasedClient post.list, I just basically did the same thing but with a get. And then I passed in the ID, which is the params.id. Now the way this works, since we're using a dynamic route in Next, in between the, basically there's a prop called params that looks like this, has params, ID string. This is built into Next. And we can then use that to grab the ID. And so this would be the slug that we're going to use to grab the ID. And this ID is being passed in from the post component. So if we look here, this post ID is the same one. And we'll do a lookup on there. This get will just grab one record. We'll use the auth mode API key. Once again, this is a public API. If we look back at our resource file from data, we know that comments both can read publicly. And then we're also going to do a selection set, so we only grab the ID and title. And then just like we did earlier on the main page where we did the post.map, we're doing the same thing essentially here, but well, we don't have a map anymore. We just had the values. And if you look at post, you have an ID and title. And so we're just showing the title, and then we're going to add comments in here in a second. So if we do this, refresh it, now we have this title, the some other title ad. If you click on it, you can see here it goes to the correct route. And the route has that ID numbers in the route. And looks good. So let's see if we can now add comments. And it's going to be really similar to what we did with posts. So let's see that. Right down here, let's see if we can just grab the data. And once again, we don't have any comments. So we're going to list the comments first, but even though we don't have any, and then add a way to add them. To get comments, we're going to once again use our cookieBasedClient since we're on the server. We'll do models.comment.list. And once, just like we had before, we can do create, delete, get, delete, all the CRUD options. But we'll do list. And we'll do auth mode, API key. And then we'll do a selection set. And really we want to grab the content. We want to grab the post ID. We'll need that in a little bit later. And we'll grab an ID. Now you're probably thinking that this is going to grab all comments for everyone for all time. And you're right. So it's grabbing a whole bunch of content. So we don't need every single one of these comments. We just need a small set of them. So we're going to do data, all comments. And we're just going to do a filter here. There is a filter here, but as of this recording, I wasn't able to get it working to filter just for that post ID. It wasn't working properly. So this works just as fine. Maybe once you scale to like millions of comments, you may want to be more specific on your comment list and filter only for the comments that match this user. But for now, this is fine. So we'll do all comments, filter. We're going to grab a comment here, and we're going to check if the comment.post.id, this one right here, equals the params.id. Because we only want the comments that are associated with this ID for this parameter. And we'll need to make sure that when we create our comments that they're linked correctly to this basically post. And now we should be able to just map through all the different comments. So I'm going to come down here, and I think, well, let's see here. We'll go comments.map. We'll have a comment and index. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste what I have here. And this is going to save us a little bit of time. Okay, so I have it all copy and pasted in here. So here's our comments map. It's going to go through all of them. I just got some Tailwind CSS in here. I'm grabbing the content of the comment. I'm also having this form. This is another server action. We're going to do this in a moment, but I also want a way to delete comments. And then we also have this is signed in. We're finally using it. So we also don't want to allow people to delete comments unless they're signed in. And this is going to check to make sure that they're signed in. We're also obviously protected by the AWS AppSync authorization rules we already added, but this is a clearer way to make sure that it's going to work. So if we save this, we come back here and refresh it, we still have nothing. So let's take a look to see if we can add a way to add a comment. For adding a comments, I think the best thing to do to start with is probably right above here, we'll add a box. So this will be a box that adds comments, and then right underneath there you'll actually see the comments. I think that's the way we want to do it. So to do that correctly, we need to create a new add component. It's gonna be a client component. So I already did that beforehand. Once again, to speed things up a little bit, and I'll explain what's in here. So this add comment component takes 3 props. An add comment, which is essentially it's a server action that we're going to pass directly in here. It's going to take a post, which is that schema post, and a params ID, which is type string. So this is probably a little bit, I don't love the way I structured this component. Let me know in the comments if you guys know of a better way. We probably could refactor this. The code will be available in the description as well. But essentially what we're doing is we have this add function that we have a submit function that prevents the default, sets comments to nothing, and then runs this add comment server action that we're passing in. And it's a pretty straightforward form. We have it on submit where we pass that add. Once again, probably not a great name. Maybe we could call it like on submit or on submit add. Nevertheless, we have this input here on change. We have the values, the comment. The one thing I wanted to make sure is that once you submit this form, that it clears the input, and that's really a lot more difficult when you're using server components. So I thought this would make more sense, and then just has submit here. So this looks pretty good. This add comment. Let's see if we can add this in as a server action real quickly too. So we're going to go back to our actions. And then from here, we need to add in this we'll call it add comment, I suppose. Let's do that. Let's do it back from the top. Export async function add comment. And we notice it does take a few props or a few arguments here. So content was type string. Post, we're going to use schema. And that's going to have the post in here, and then the params ID type string. And then we need to make sure that we import it in from this data resource. And then from here, if you look at the official Next.js documentation, they have an example of using server actions and then using Zod to do some formatting and clearing and checking and validation for you. I did a whole video on Zod. If you guys are interested, you can look at my channel. I'm just going to use just really simple validation here. I'm just going to trim the input that comes in, make sure it doesn't equal 0, and if it does, return. I probably should do more validation, but just for this, I'm not going to. I'm going to do await cookieBasedClient.models.comment.create. And then we have post and content. Remember, one thing that's going to tie this comment to the post is you have to pass in the post itself. So that's why we're passing it in here. And then we can just console log got comment. And then I always like to do this. Data comment, rename it there, comment. And then you're going to do revalidate path. So we want to revalidate the path, but this is a little tricky because if you come here, we have this path right here that has this big posts. So that's why we pass in the params ID so we can basically revalidate that URL, that path. So we're going to do path and then params ID. And that should be it for our add comment. All right, we're getting closer now. What we need to do is add in that add comment box into our posts route. So I think right above here is where we want to add it. So first, we have this is signed in that we added earlier. Might as well use it. Then we're going to have this add comment. That's the server action, but we also need to import in the component. Add component, add comment from /components /add comment. Okay, so now we have add comment here, so it should be complaining that we need all these props. Yeah, add comment. So now we can pass in that server action there, and we'll go params ID, which will equal, I think it's params.id. And then we'll need the post, and this will be the post. Now I was getting a little error here that it doesn't like it because it's not exactly the same. So I can just, long as it's very similar, it'll work right here. So I'll do as post, and then I just need to make sure this gets imported in. Okay, I think that looks good, and then this will be null. All right, so now I have an add comment here. So let's see if this works. Cool, so now I have this add comment box, and let's add a comment. So here is a comment. Hit enter. Great, and here it is. Here is a comment. Now we have this X here, but it doesn't do anything. So I haven't figured that out yet, but we at least have the comment showing up. Here is a comment. So let's do the delete as well. And if we go back to down here, we kind of started that right here with this server action, where we have this use server, and then we have revalidate path, but we're not doing anything. So we probably should go into the actions and actually add in a server action for delete comment. So let's add it at the top. Export async function delete comment. And this is going to be like a normal one that just has form data in it. And then we're going to do form data.get. And then we'll have to run toString on it. And if not ID return, so if there's something weird about it or they didn't submit it, then it'll just return here. And then this is probably becoming familiar to you, but use cookieBasedClient .models.comment.delete, and then we just need to pass in the ID, which is right there. And then we can console log deleted data deleted comment deleted comment deleted. There we go. So now what this will do is it'll delete the comment, and it should work here. You may be thinking, why didn't you do something like this, add comment, pass in the params ID? I kind of like this form data way of doing it, and this is all a server component. So I had to, if we go back to here, since this is a server component, I'm not using a client component here. I could have refactored this whole comments, this whole delete button situation into a client component. But since I was using server components, I thought this was easier, just a different way to do it. It's basically the same thing, server actions that we're doing. And then I just add the revalidate path here instead of inside the actions, because then I would have to somehow pass. I just felt it was maybe a little bit easier doing it this way. I didn't have to pass the params.id. All right, so let's see if that works. First, of course, we have to probably call it, right? So to call it in here, we'll need to just await deleteComment, and then we'll pass in the form data. And it automatically imported deleteComment in. Save it. Refresh. All right, and if I click here, cool, it disappeared. So I can another comment, number 2 comment, number 3 comment, misspelled, and each one of them I can just delete each one. And it shouldn't have this X here if I log out. So if I can click the sign out button, okay, redirected back to this front page. I click here, I could still see the comment and I don't see the X, so I can't delete it. It's all working as I thought. Perfect. So the last part we want to do is see if we can get this into a production environment, get this website deployed. And to do that, we're going to use Amplify Hosting and the new Gen 2 console. If you take a look here, we've been using this ephemeral environment, but really you don't want to use this for production. Doesn't make sense. This is just for testing locally. So what you need to do is log into your AWS console, and then you can type in AWS Amplify here. And this will bring up your AWS console. And what's nice too, it has this manage sandboxes button. So if for some reason you're in the screen, you hit Control-C, you press no, and it didn't delete the backend, you need to delete it later on, you can go to here and there it is. I can click on it and click delete selected. But for now, I want to create a new app. So I'm going to click new app. I'm going to click build an app, Gen 2. You can also, it says public preview right now. So as of this recording, it's public preview. And then you can choose option 2, choose GitHub. And what I did before is I actually put this whole app on GitHub. So make sure you push up your repository. It's a public repository. It could be private too if you wanted. And now we should be able to select it. So inside the screen here, I'm going to click next. And it's going to ask me to log into GitHub. So I'm going to do that really quickly. You might have to click GitHub, update GitHub permissions. I did that. I had to make sure that my pop-up's working. But now I can click the drop down here and I click this code first type safety example. It's going to ask me which branch to use. I only have one, main. But you can support mono repos and other things. There's more advanced configuration if you need. I'm going to click next. And it should automatically detect everything I need here. Next.js, Amplify deploy here. It's going to create a new service role. If this here, right here, if I need to add in any special environmental variables, line packages. Now for build images, since I'm using Next 14, I have to add in something specific here. So to put in this build image, it's Amplify::AL 2023. You can do this after you deploy, but it's probably a good idea to do it beforehand. And in the future, this will be auto-detected, but since Next 14 just came out, we have to put in a special build image. I'm going to leave everything else defaulted. I'll click next. And it should have everything else fine here. I'm just going to click save and deploy. All right, so it's deployed. You can see here. We can take a little bit of a look around. Click this little arrow here. We can see that it took about 10 minutes to deploy. Usually the first deployment does take a little bit of time. If you saw any errors here, we could go into like the build and look at the logs to see what happened. One nice thing is we can click deployed backend resources. So if you want to get directly to the identity or the Cognito user pools, you can click right here. You can also look at the IAM roles, the Lambda functions, anything with the AppSync service. All the links are in this big table of all the resources that were created. It also gives us this domain right now, you can take a look here. You can click API Playground, and this will bring you directly to the AppSync Playground for this. So you can start running queries and try it out, which is great. It also has this authentication. It has like a little bit of user management, so I can add a user here. It gives me some setup instructions, a lot of it useful information that you might need to use. You can also redeploy. Now, each one of these deployments are based on a branch. So this is obviously the main branch, but if I wanted to, I could connect like a development branch up. All I need to do that would be to go back into my code and create a development branch. And then I can connect it here. So then every time I push to the development branch, it would create a new deployment. It's really handy that way. One thing, we can also do some access controls and hosting. We can do environmental variables. Right now, we can't do custom domains, but that is coming soon. And there is actually, if you guys are interested, there is a workaround to do custom domains using the AWS CLI, if that is a really important feature that you need to look at right now. But for the most part, this is developer preview, so we just really want developers to take a look at it. And in the future, it'll go GA, which is more general availability. Now, if we click this link, this will actually bring up the app. You can see there's a little bit of an issue. I noticed like this button here isn't here. It's there, but I can't see it. So if I click on it, some of these buttons are missing. This is actually a bug, and I don't know why it didn't show up locally, but this is a weird issue if you are running our Amplify UI library and Tailwind CSS at the same time. There's an easy fix for it though. So if I go back into my global CSS and I just copy and paste this code here, basically what I'm doing is I'm changing the background color to the internal background color. If I save this, and I'm going to go back to my command line, get status, get add, I'm going to commit it, updated CSS, I'm going to push. And so went ahead and pushed to our app. And if we come back here, you see it's deploying again. So let's give this a couple minutes and see if that fixed that little visual bug we just saw. Okay, so let's see if it's working now. I redeployed it. I'm going to click this button here. Let's open up a new window. It's running SSR. Cool, now we have our sign in button. It's not visible. If I click sign in, let's create a new account. And then I'm going to look on my phone to grab my code that was just emailed to me. All right, so I still have no titles. I'm going to click add title, add a new title. Cool, so now I have our new title here. I can click X here and it's deleted. Click a new one, add another title. I can click into it, add a comment, another comment. All right, and if I click here, if I click sign out, great. So this all seems to work fine. I hope you guys learned something. I think this is a really powerful tool to create your backends and your front ends. It works great with the Next ecosystem. You can use all your AWS accounts. One thing I didn't cover too much too was that we just kind of touched the surface of what you can do with this new Amplify Gen 2. You can add in your own CDK directly in here. So if you're already familiar with CDK, you can essentially get access and create your own stacks. So if I do like, let's call this backend, and I look at here, I can create a stack if I want to. I can also get access to existing resources like here, auth and data. So if I needed to make some changes to data or add some like a custom HTTP data source, I can do it. So there's a lot of possibilities, a lot of flexibilities here. So I hope you guys learned something. Leave a comment below. Let me know. Thanks.